Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, whichever time zone you're in today. My name is Kayla. I'm the founder of OCC Project, and we are joined here today by Maria Quinn, child care coach. Say hi, Maria.
Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone.
I wanted to first take just a quick second. We are doing these Ask Me Anythings every 2 weeks, bi-monthly. Sometimes they are centered around specific topics. Sometimes they are just general knowledge. And today is going to be one of our first general knowledge. This will be available afterwards in case you missed it. If these spark any questions as we're talking, feel free to drop them into a chat. If we see them before we end, then we'll go ahead and respond. And if not, then we will follow up with you afterwards, after it goes live on all of our pages. So the first thing I want to cover real quick is just a bit of a touch base on what's happening here at OCC Project. You'll see in the next, if you haven't already, some social media about us going to the Military Influencer Conference. So if you are also heading to the Military Influencer Conference, I'd love to see you there. We will be setting up a booth this year, thanks to some pretty amazing sponsors who are helping us out, that will allow a private space for breastfeeding and pumping parents to have a place that's safe for their milk, it's private, and then they don't need to leave the conference and miss out on that time. So we're excited to be able to help offer that as another measure for accessibility and equity in families. Also in our case management, I'm sure that you've seen that it is still has the banner up that we are at capacity. We are still taking families in as we go. It's just, we cannot guarantee that 48-hour turnaround time that we usually do. Just this week, we had about 15 families enter into our case management. And that is quite a lot for what our organization is, especially since we already had, 60 or so that were currently in our case management. So I promise we are getting to you as fast as we can. And what we hope that this Ask Me Anything does is answer some of those questions that maybe you have that don't necessarily need case management. Maybe it's just a little bit of knowledge, you got confusion. There's a lot of acronyms within the DoD. So today, that is what we'd like to cover. I'm going to start, and I'm just going to do a few basics that you probably already know, but just in case. And I can also put some up here. So the first thing that I'm going to cover is the CDC, the Child Development Center. These can go by a lot of different names, but at this point in time, I think everyone knows what the CDC is. If you do end up Googling it, you may get the Centers for Disease Control. These are usually on installation, the Child Development Centers. They are DoD-run centers. They meet the same requirements as national accredited NAAC, and they are subsidized. So these are your options that are going to be far lower cost at a really high quality rate. The primary barrier we see is just access, because everybody does want to get into the CDC. That in kind of an hours-based situation, especially for our dual mill or maybe our single service members who have longer hours or shift schedules. But the CDC is what most families are familiar with, and what we see most families really they're trying to access. All right, the next one is going to be FCC homes, or if you're Navy, the Child Development Homes. They are the same thing. They can be on an installation, they can be off an installation, and this is really going to vary depending on where you are in the world, to be honest. They are still very, very high quality. They follow curriculum. They are also DoD. So DoD will license them, DoD will inspect them, DoD sets the standards for these homes, and they follow the same priority that CDCs do. So you may still see a little bit of a barrier to access if you're not dual mill or single service member. But what's great about these is that they have flexibility. The CDHS FCCs are the priority for the DoD because of that flexibility and the ability to meet that weekend, evening, overnight care, as long as they are at the location that you are at. And you can look this up at any time. You can't see the exact addresses, but if you go to the DoD, which I will drop in the chat here in a moment, I'll give you a link where you can go to the public search for DoD installations. And when you type in that installation, it'll pop up all of the FCCs or CDHs that are currently registered in that area, which will give you a good idea of, what is in the surrounding area that you may be currently at or looking at moving to. I also wanted to touch base on an FCC coordinator. So an FCC currently, as I said, you can go to the link that I am going to drop into the chat here when my turn stops. The FCC coordinator is the individual that you're going to contact when you do want to access FCC or CDH care. Currently, unlike when you apply to the CDC through militarychildcare.com, if you want to access an FCC, you'll still apply through militarychildcare.com, but to find out what their availability is, to find out what steps you need to complete to get to that next step, you need to go through generally an FCC coordinator. If you need help finding your FCC coordinator, your local CYP should be able to get you that information. If you're still struggling, of course, you can reach out to us. We're happy to help you find that. They are the individuals who will be able to help you better understand what is available at your local installation. FCC coordinators, they run quite a few programs, right, Maria?
Yeah, and I'd love to throw in here, they are also the ones, if you're interested in becoming an FCC provider or if you have questions about it, it is an opportunity to start your own business. One of the perks that we hear folks that are like the most is you're actually going to be paid to also take care of your own children if you keep them home with you in your situation. But it's your own business, right? So you're setting the hours, you're setting what makes sense for your family. And so if you have questions, please reach out to your FCC coordinator at your location or us, and we can get you connected.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Yes. We're also seeing a lot of community partnerships when it comes to FCCs that are available in the local areas. For example, Norfolk currently has a community partnership. They partnered with it's too fast. My brain, it went too fast. But they partnered with a local organization that does also accredit and license centers. And because of that partnership, it really turned the FCCs. There were a handful, and then the next day there were 40. It was incredible. I love it. It's really expanded access there in that area. And then the last piece that I'm going to talk about before I turn it over is one that a lot of families get really confused about. And honestly, I understand, because look at all the letters. Just look at them. There's just so many letters here. MCCYN stands for My Military Childcare in Your Neighborhood. Not My Childcare in Your Neighborhood, but again, it's a lot of letters. People call it so many different things. It is ultimately the Military Fee Assistance Subsidy Program. So it is the program that allows you to, as long as you are eligible, you access childcare at a reduced rate off the installation as long as it meets certain accreditation standards. That is the original MCCYN. So these are your nationally accredited centers. They are more likely to be your KinderCares, your Goddards, your Primroses. It has been expanded to include things like Montessori schools. There are some smaller in-home centers that can also accept it. It has really high accreditation standards. And so that's why we typically see the same kind of names popping up with it, because they have it down pat at this point, right? They're all across the nation. Shortly after that came out, we started seeing MCCYN Plus. It was a new program that was rolled out because, again, nationally accredited centers, your KinderCares, your Goddards, did not always have the capacity for what our families were currently needing. And so they expanded the program, MCCYN Plus. It is not in every state, but what this program does allow you to do is access the same kind of subsidy program, but with state quality rated centers. And so these could be your in-home centers. These could be still what am I trying to think of? Like center-based centers, commercial-based centers, instead of in-home care. But it is the same program, eligible in some states. And to be fair, we've even seen quite a few families who are not in an MCCYN plus state be able to access that program if they can't find anything under MCCYN that fits their needs. So it does have a lot of flexibility. You may have heard it be called the child care aware subsidy because they are the third-party administrator for quite a few of these programs. But military child care in your neighborhood is the definition of that one. And I will now roll this over to Maria.
Thanks. I want to focus on two things really quickly while we take a little pause. The first one is what we've had a lot of families just not understand, and leaders as well, is the idea on how does this fee assistance subsidy thing even work? Here's the basics of it. So for 2024, the DoD raised the cap for each child under the age of 5 to $1,800. And so what that means is we're working backwards on a couple of these things. So there's a lot of math involved in these childcare programs, which is honestly, at the end of the day, that's what families want to know to be able to plan their life and prioritize their expenses. And so that's what we like to bring a lot of focus on, is just how do you math the childcare, right? And get after your family life and goals. So each child under the age of 5 is eligible for $1,800. And so at the CDC, that rate is already figured out to be that basically subsidized care rate. And that's what you're going to see in all of the sheets across all of the websites for how much am I going to pay based on how much my total family income is. The second part of that is, so that's the subsidized care. Fee assistance is the allowing you to access the same price you would at the CDC, but the DoD understands that CDCs were designed to serve, I think, less than 30% of families. Fact check me on that, somebody. And so we understand that there's a whole other 70% who may need to access something different based on where they're working, where they're living, ages of their child. We've seen a heavy increase in the past 2 years on differently abled children needing to access different situations and being able to find out where they can be successful and help their parents navigate the situations. And those are often right now out of the CDC. Now, I will give a nod to the SecDef's letter that just came out and his continuing effort on supporting our families, where there has been a heavy emphasis. Kudos to the Army for leading the way last year on hiring and figuring out what those positions are so that we can allow more of our folks that are in the EFM program into our on-base resources, because sometimes that's just the easiest based on where they're living and working. And right now, that's not the case for a lot of our families. They need that extra support to be able to get out of that overwhelmed state, get back focused on the mission, because they know their sweet little one is secure in their place of care. Okay, so we talked about fee assistance, subsidy, and the difference. Yeah.
Before you move on, we did have a question in the comments, and it kind of relates to what you were talking about there.
Yeah.
So it's a family who is needing after-school activity support in Southern California, and they're finding it impossible to find someone for the 3 to 7 2 days a week because they need a respite caregiver. And the people they're finding, the budget is just way higher than what they can afford, and higher than what EFM respite pay is. And so kind of to your point of being able to bring some of those families on the installation, do you think that would be applicable?
That's a great question. We have 11 childcare deserts in the DoD right now, right? And so those are the 11 locations that, at least for last year and this year also, have the highest level of wait lists and families requesting care on MCC.com. So let's pause for a quick second on MCC.com. Militarychildcare.com is the most important website out there for all of us, no matter where you're at, whether you're active, reserve, or guard. That is the place where all of the information has to come into and all the decisions are made from. And that is the single platform that the DoD is focused on in ensuring that every single family can access the information and access care. So even at my personal request to you is, even if you are, it hasn't worked in the past for you to access care on base or through MCC.com, please register, please demonstrate your need, because that's the only way that our leaders can actually quantify what our families of today need. There has been some trust broken, and folks have been concerned about transparency when it comes to accessing care and those fee assistance. And our hope is that we can help share, increase that trust and build the visibility. And the number one thing is militarychildcare.com. That's where you got to go. You need to figure it out, get comfortable with it. If you get stuck, there's a phone number on the splash page. If you really need help, reach out to us. We do that every week, helping folks just navigate how to access their options, because that will be your number one place to be able to seek care, and demonstrate, listen, I did all the things I could, and I still am stuck. So either I still need some more education on what my options are, or I need some support navigating a tricky situation that I'm in. And that's where we want to make sure that no one feels alone. So to your question, Kayla, maybe I would need to look at the case a little bit more. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
And to be fair, when we have families who reach out to us for assistance and they are active duty, so they would be qualifying, the very first step that we have families do is go to militarychildcare.com if they haven't already. And there are quite a few scenarios we will walk you through. We can talk about ways that you can adjust programming to fit your needs. And we can tell you who you would need to contact for that and help you in even drafting. But ultimately, if you're not already in militarychildcare.com, you don't already have that request, nothing that we are able to support you with will move.
And frankly, you're behind, right? Frankly, you're behind, right? And so that's what I want to be really honest with our leaders and families is militarychildcare.com. That is the key, because we have families come to us, they've Googled, they've done whatever. And if they haven't even done that, they're sweet family that came in recently and wasn't registered, and the baby's due in a few days, right? And so it's not a joke that we need you on those wait lists so that they can see and they can pre-plan, okay, what's that classroom going to look like when you need your care? Because that's what they're doing, right? They're trying to figure out how do we best serve as many families as possible. But if they don't have the information of your family's specific needs because you didn't register, you're already behind. So step one, make sure everyone's registered in your unit, in your team, at your base, because that's where the DoD wants to be able to capture that numbers and meet the actual need of our families of today.
Thank you. And there's another question here, and it says, and this may be something that we need to circle back on, but I wanted to throw it out in case you have some insight on it. Is there any talk about increasing family separation pay or looking at separation pay that includes a Monday through Friday government travel so more families can afford support when the spouse is traveling?
I love that question. And there's nothing that I'm aware of right now. I know we heard last year and we're excited for it to come on board here. I think October is what, if I remember from last year, maybe October is what we were looking at. The JTR change to allow for the PCS challenge of childcare to be able to allow that reimbursement. So once we get the details, we can't wait to share that, once that's official. But as far as your question, no, but you're really honing in on a really important thing. And I'll speak from, just my personal experience and working with folks that are in our fourth generation model in our service of trying to figure out, now we have 3 different phases, and this is where they're deployed in place and their childcare needs are changing. And so, yes, I think that's a really worthy one. I'd love to talk with you more about that offline, whoever wrote the question, because maybe we need to tee up and do some research and figure out that it's something we want to go after once we research it for a policy. So please reach out and we'll have a bigger conversation.
Wonderful. And I have your information here, so I'll be able to do that connection afterwards.
Thanks.
All right. And I will now, I cut you off. We were just about to start.
Oh, yeah.
Your coordinator, so I apologize.
Yeah. Okay. So Kayla covered the vocab in the beginning. And again, the goal here is education and support. So let's get all on the same page when it comes to vocab so we can help each other out. So we're going to talk about this. For the DAF, I'll be honest, I'm not familiar if the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard has this position. But for the DAF, what we have is called a community child care coordinator. And they are at many locations, and their role is to help families understand their full suite of options. Everything from, is the CDC best? Is an FCC best? Is an MCCY subsidy best? What are you looking for, right? And is it something else, a little more non-traditional based on your family's needs, whether it's an au pair or a nanny? Their ability to cover all of those topics. Now, they're not at every location. So if you don't have one, it's a great time to petition your parent advisory board or your leadership and say, hey, do we have one of these? Hey, what's keeping us from having one? And what would it take to get one? Because they really are that focal point on base to be able to know that local landscape, which is what we find is the most important when helping families, is being able to see what's available in their area, right? Having that realistic look for what they need. Okay, the next one I want to cover is the Child Care in Your Home pilot program. So CCYH, you may have seen that one around. Originally, it was called IHCC, if you Google it, over 3 years ago. It's in year 3 right now, and it is the first DoD fee assistance program. Again, it's a pilot, okay? But it allows for this fee assistance for hiring your own trusted caregiver or nanny. They have made extraordinary strides in the last 3 years to continue to adjust this to what our families truly need. The big year 3 ones that I can't remember if we had a Facebook Live on it or not, but I'll cover them really quick.
We did have one.
Okay, good. So go back to our old one. We've already done it. But an exceptional program, and they have been receptive to the family interviews and the stories and meeting the needs. So it is with each change becoming more accessible to all of our ranks. And we have been trying to, fill in the gap if there's education support when it comes to, what does it mean to become a household employer, and how do you do the taxes, and how do you actually write an ad that somebody's actually going to respond to, right? And so that's something that we're really focused on, making sure that is a great program for everybody.
And real quick, because it did literally just come out, this program is shifting. So it did historically go through a third-party administrator. As of November 1, it is shifting into militarychildcare.com. So the program is going to be, there's not any large changes. It is just how you will be managed as you go. It will no longer be managed by a third-party administrator. It will be in-house. And you will likely be doing pretty much everything through militarychildcare.com, as far as submitting timesheets and confirming hours and things along those lines. So as we get more information about that, we'll be pushing it out. But you will still be applying right now the exact same way you always have, which is through militarychildcare.com.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, there is a serious wait list in multiple of the areas where you would imagine we need the most. But keep getting on the wait list and keep getting your family's needs known and heard. And just as a reminder, if you make the decision to hire a nanny because that's what your family needs at this time, a trusted caregiver, whether it's a grandparent or somebody else, I just really need you to be sure that you understand the payments and the process, and you budgeted for it. So if you need a little more personal help with that, please let me know, because I want to make sure whether this program is a good choice for your family or perhaps it's not. And then let's find a better option for you. The last one that Kayla just mentioned, again, we hear all these, NIAC, MCCYN. So CCA, Child Care of America, is a third-party administrator that is on contract with the DoD and some of the branches to execute their current fee assistance programs. So specifically MCCYN and MCCYN Plus. If you're a Navy, you're not utilizing CCA. You're using straight in-house in your service to be able to access care. We've seen that historically. We do have the least amount of Navy folks in there. So we're doing some research on, hey, how is that working well? And just really curious on how the benefits they're experiencing.
Yep. Wonderful. Well, that concludes our brief overview of what our definitions are. Of course, there are so many acronyms, and each branch is probably going to refer to some of these things slightly differently. But this is your 10,000-foot overview. We do currently have, if you go to our, we're building out our education page where we really talk about by branch and by program what these things mean. We have a current guide that is for Air Force, Space Force, which talks about the military child care programs. It's supposed to give you an idea of whether or not this might be a good fit for your family before you start to really invest into it. So if you do want to read more, that is available currently on our website. And as Maria mentioned, we want everyone going through militarychildcare.com to start with. That is where you join every wait list. And if you are seeking any military childcare programs and you come into our case management, that's the first thing that we're going to ask you is, have you already gotten on that wait list? And I think it's important to know that there are zero repercussions to you joining a wait list that you don't need. So it is better to join it, then say, do I really need this? And then you can leave it rather than doing nothing at all and then just sit and wait. You can always leave a list. You can always change your date of care needed. It is very flexible within the website. A lot of families say, well, I was thinking about doing the CDC, but I was worried because if I applied and I got in and then I said, this doesn't fit my family, what if I never get assistance again? That's not how it works. It's not punitive. You can get on whatever you think that you might need to the best of your knowledge, and then you can always pull back later. So please, more is better in this situation.
Yeah, and really quick on that, Kayla, a lot of the questions we get are like, okay, I submitted and it's been a month. Why? And I'm not piecing for 6 months, but no one's talked to me. Well, it's going to be okay. And so sometimes, with any system, things happen and it gets tricky or folks fall through the cracks. But the key here, can you help us understand that day? Like, it's 30 days out from needed care before they're even going to start triaging, right?
Yes. So it is. There's
It's
the old joke,
very
right?
basic.
The old joke of like, get on your wait list when you're still thinking about getting pregnant, right? So it's not really accurate. Your priority status is going to mean the most when it comes to accessing any of these programs. So we do recommend getting on the wait list, but they do not start looking at your place in that wait list until you're about 45 days out.
Okay.
And then you will be booted to the front or kicked to the middle somewhere, depending on what your priority placement is. And we did a really good guide on this. We color coded it. It is mostly color coded for CDC, FCC, CCYH access. And we do talk about that briefly within the guide that I previously talked about, the Air Force Space Force one, about how our priority placement worked to help you understand. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't join the wait list, because that demand is what is going to drive supply.
Yeah, and just helping the current investments in the classroom and making sure they have the right makeup of teachers, but also the future, right? As the MTC is the only way we can demonstrate who in each branch has. We already know who they have children in DEERS, but that's not the data that's being used. You have to demonstrate the need. So yeah, get familiar with it. Make sure that all of your teammates are familiar with it. And then as soon as you're thinking about a PCS, because I know a lot of us included, just made it through the summer PCS. We have a lot of families right now seeking support in this off-cycle PCS for this fall and before Christmas timeframe. And so we're about to see that uptick again and making sure they have the right information. So again, as you're thinking about as a leader, as a family, as soon as somebody is getting ordered or thinking about you're going to pull them somewhere, hey, what's your family situation? Bringing up childcare early and often. Have you considered it? And helping them be proactive in that. That's such a great way to relieve some of the stress and ensure that their mission readiness is not going to be impacted when they show up, if they've already been thinking about that and they have the resources available.
Absolutely. And again, if after you get on that list, if you've been navigating, you've been reading, you're stuck, you don't know where to turn, you can always reach out to us through our case management system. It is not just for families seeking assistance. It is also for leaders who are trying to learn more about what these programs mean, especially specific to their geographical area. And we're happy to help you navigate what that looks like so that you can pass that information on. Okay, well, that concludes us for today. If there are any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. And we do always circle back to these after we close them and make sure that we have all the links and all the questions answered. Thanks for joining us today. Bye.